Hey friends, Happy New Year. Hope everyone has had a great holiday season and you're well rested and were able to sleep in and full of energy again and ready to start the new year in the new seminary. So again, we're going to be transitioning to the Old Testament. So there's a few things that I want to go over first with just kind of introducing the Old Testament with the students, just some things that you might want to consider. You'll notice in the pacing guide that the first lesson is Abraham 3. That's again flexible. It might be worthwhile to take a day or half a day or take some time during the first week to just introduce some of the things of the Old Testament, just to kind of get the students excited for that. The first is obviously that you want to talk about is that the focus of the Old Testament is still on Jesus Christ. So taking the opportunity to find symbols and shadows and patterns and things of the life of Jesus Christ in the life of the prophets, in the covenants and the laws and the ordinances that they participated in is going to be central focus of the Old Testament is, again, deepening conversion to Jesus Christ. And they're going to see that through many of those examples that you'll see in that the Old Testament stories. So it's kind of exciting to be able to do that. When you're introducing it, the lesson, Introduction to the Old Testament, has a great video from Elder Christofferson about the life of William Tyndale. Consider maybe showing that. It talks about the sacrifices that many people anciently made in order to have access to the scriptures. And then he talks a little bit about one of the concerns he has in our modern day, which is scriptural illiteracy. So people not knowing much about the scriptures, even though they have basically unlimited access to the scriptures. They just don't engage with them the way that they should. Another idea, thing that you could do is a Bible quiz with, just the books of the Old and the New Testament, just quizzing them on how well they know where the books are in the Bible. So something you might do is have the students make two cards, one that says old, one that says new. If you have whiteboards, you just have the top says old and flip it over and it says new, something like that. However you want to do that. But all you have to do is, as a teacher, just hold up, just call out the name of a book, and they have to hold up old or new, depending on where they think that it's located. You might actually be surprised with some of them. The students don't really know very well where the books are located in the Old or New Testament. So just kind of a way to help build that biblical literacy, that scriptural literacy that Elder Christofferson was talking about. All right. The next is just looking at the organization of the Old Testament. Maybe take a minute with the students and just say that the Old Testament is organized in a specific way. It's not random. The first is the first 5 books of Moses are called the Law or the Torah or the Pentateuch, depending on who's saying it. But those are Genesis through Deuteronomy. So that's the Law or the Torah. Then it goes into history with Joshua through Esther. It gives the 600-year history. The poetry and wisdom books, sometimes also called the writings, is Job through Song of Solomon's, includes Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, things like that also. And then the prophets, Isaiah through Malachi. Those, again, are the prophetic writings. So the history, Joshua through Esther, is pretty chronological, but the prophets is not chronological, and the poetry is not chronological. So understanding that sometimes, Isaiah lived at a certain time, so he'll be referred to in the book of Kings, but then you'll go and see his writings separately from them. So anyways, this kind of helped them understand how those books are organized. Recently, you might have seen the news that the church made some updates to their policy around Bible translations. Again, we use the King James Version, but that is not the only version that is available to us. Elder Rendland said, who chairs the scriptural committee, it says the King James Version is beautiful and powerful, but it sometimes can be difficult to understand. Sometimes that's an understatement. Even for people, it's a great translation, but it's not always the clearest or even the most accurate translation all the time. So we want to, just have access to different translations. And one of the ways to do that, in the handbook, it also gives some examples of translations that are appropriate for different reading levels. So one of the translations that I go to frequently that I like is actually the NIV, the New International Version. It's a fantastic version for just clarity, and sometimes the translation I think is actually a little bit better. But there is an app called Parallel Plus. The icon looks like that. And then what it does is it allows you to choose the different translations that you want to have visible on your device. And you can actually just kind of read them side by side. So the way I usually do it, set it up, is I'll have the King James Version, the NIV, the Net Bible, and one or two other ones, the ESV. And that way you can kind of see parallel the verses, how they're translated, and you can get a lot more clarity with it. So that's going to be a powerful, powerful tool for when they're studying the Bible for these next 2 years, of being able to see the different translations. So I would actually really highly encourage you guys to encourage your students to have access to that app and see it. So when they're doing their studies, they'll be able to understand it a lot more clearly. All right, quick teaching idea for Abraham 3. This kind of briefly mentioned in the supplemental teaching ideas at the end of the lesson. But the idea for variety that I'm using here is visualization. And again, the ideas for variety are at the end of the manual in the appendix. But this one is basically they read it and then they kind of visualize it. They draw a picture or whatever that kind of represents what they've read. In Abraham 3 is where we get the first part of the chapter actually talks about Kolob and Kokolabim and all of those Shania and things like that, which are kind of unique. But I think it's important that students actually understand and know what those verses are about. It's kind of sometimes used as questions for missionaries, like, what is Kolob? And I've heard these weird things about, like, God lives on Kolob. And so having them understand what Kolob is, that it's in the book of Abraham, and that the first part of chapter 3, where the Lord is showing Abraham the stars and the heavens, and Kolob and all of these different things, is actually just a object lesson for what he's going to teach later about spirits. So how those two connect. So, for example, Kolob is a symbol of Christ, right? It's nearest to the throne of God. And in those verses, you'll see, how, say, maybe have them draw out, like you have the image there, what Abraham sees when he talks to God, and then maybe talk about how that conversation that the Lord has with Abraham helps prepare him for understanding the premortal life and the role of the Savior Jesus Christ, and our role as well in that firmament of the heavens, that we were many of the noble and great ones. And then you can kind of use some of those quotes that are in the lesson. But that's just kind of a way to just help students understand a little bit about these scriptures that are unique, different, can kind of seem a little bit strange outside of the church, but put them in the proper context of the Lord teaching Abraham about his creations, but really teaching Abraham about himself and about his spirit children and the role that they would play here on earth. Anyways, I'm excited for the Old Testament. There's a lot of great information. You might want to take a little bit of time before teaching about Abraham just to explain where the book of Abraham comes from. A lot of students might not know the history behind that. So maybe take 5 minutes and explain where the book of Abraham comes from. That will be also important and valuable for them to know also. All right. Have a good week and Happy New Year.